Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master, Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Welcome to Window on the West, where we explore all the ages of Tolkien's Middle-earth, with your hosts, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Welcome to Window on the West. Thanks for joining us one more time this week. My name is Jonathan Watson from theonering.com, and I'm here along with Dan Coates and Michael Grumbine.
Howdy.
As we continue walking slowly, very slowly, through the Silmarillion, getting into chapter 4, is it, I think, right, of the coming of Elves and the captivity of Melkor?
Should be chapter 3.
Oh, chapter 3, I don't know. This is the 4th episode, 5th episode. I don't have it open right in front of me this second. But yes, we are well on our way into the deep histories of Middle-earth. And we finally get to meet the elves today. But before we do, get to see both of you guys. It's been a minute. We usually start off with a little bit of...
All that is gold does not glitter.
And we'll continue that in a certain vein. And we're going to go trivia this time so that it's not just silly little quotes that are easy to think are Chesterton, apparently, because that's all that I...
You're just mad that I stumped you last week.
It was the last 2 weeks. It's both times. I still blame Ethan Nicole and his Chesterton's Gateway book. Reading that every once in a while. So let's do a couple of trivia bits, see how good you guys know this. And again, Dan, you're at a disadvantage. I'm sorry, but we still love you.
I signed up for the podcast, so I knew what I was getting into.
All right. So question number 1, and I'll give you multiple choice. So we'll do it that way because I think some of these might be a little easier if we don't do that. So, okay, where was J.R.R. Tolkien born? Was he born in Amsterdam? Was he born in Durban, South Africa? Or maybe Pretoria, South Africa? Or maybe Bloemfontein, South Africa? Or maybe Exeter, England, which is a city in England.
Which is not in South Africa.
Which is not in South Africa. So it is 3 choices in South Africa, which might be a hint. But the other 2 are Amsterdam, Exeter, Bloemfontein, Durban, or Pretoria. So kind of, I'm sure Michael knows this. He's probably read enough to have come across it a few times. So you guys ready with your answers?
I guess I'll guess Pretoria based on nothing at all. So
nice. Yes.
We'll see how that goes.
All right, Michael.
Yeah, he was born in Bloemfontein, South Africa.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you got halfway there. You were very close.
I picked the right country, so
you did pick the right country. Yeah, you had a 60% shot to get the country right. So yeah, it is Bloemfontein. So there's one for Michael. Yeah, and then he moved. His father died, I think, and then he moved to England when he was 4, maybe 3. 3. I feel like it was 3.
I don't remember which one it was, but he was very young. Yeah.
He was very young, and then he moved to England along with his sister, I believe.
Yep.
Is that right? Yep. And then from there, right, we can get into all that. But yeah, he was pretty young. He was born in South Africa, believe it or not. Just like Elon Musk. They're exactly the same. So here's one.
Except for everything about them, they're exactly the same.
Yeah. They both create worlds of their own making. It's amazing.
Okay, all right, and they both have a healthy respect for free speech.
There you go. Yes, that's right. As long as you don't have a king in front of you, because anyway. Here's the next one. Which of these things is not made of the wood lebethron? Which of these things is not made of the wood lebethron? The casket carrying the crown at Aragorn's coronation. The chair of the Steward of Denethor. Or the staves given by Faramir to Frodo and Sam. Which of these things were not made of the wood lebethron? Which was cherished by the skilled craftsmen of Gondor. So one again is the casket carrying the crown at Aragorn's coronation, the chair of the Steward of Denethor, or the staves given by Faramir to Frodo and Sam.
This is you picked a tricky one.
I did.
I'm going to say the chair.
The chair. Michael?
The casket.
Dan!
Hey.
Well done. The chair. The chair is actually made of stone in the halls of kings.
Right. Good call,
yeah.
Dan. So this is what I do know. I do know that the crown itself is made of levithron. So I wasn't sure if you were trying to trick me, but with the trick and it was the casket too. I had forgotten about the casket.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's kind of a weird name for something carrying a crown. It's the dead crown.
I figured Denethor was a bad guy, so he probably wouldn't be having the special wood for his chair.
You sound like the kid who got an A on a test in 8th grade and never studied, but has all these reasons that you're like, how did you get that right?
But Faramir has it because he's a good guy. Yeah, see,
that's right. Yeah, perfect.
Your reasons are so wrong, but you got it right. Well done.
Next one. All right, next one. What famous music group tried to make their own Lord of the Rings movie? Was it Led Zeppelin, The Beatles, Pink Floyd, or Carmen? Just had to throw that in there for old time's sake. If you guys haven't listened to us on the Babylon Bee podcast, Carmen is a 90s Christian rapper, a classic famous music group.
That's a project I would want to see, though.
that would have been awesome.
It would have been like Carmen with boxing gloves, boxing with the Balrog.
Yeah. Can you imagine what it would have been like? Sauron bite the dust. We would have had.
Yeah,
exactly. It would have been great. So again, what famous music group tried to make their own Lord of the Rings movie? The Beatles, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, or Carmen? Michael, I'll go to you first this time.
I do know the answer to this one. So
so Dan, you go first this time.
In that case, I'll guess the Beatles.
Michael?
It is correct. It is the Beatles.
Hey, 2-2. This is going to go down to the wire.
Yeah, although Pink Floyd had a song. Yeah, they each had references to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin did. I think Pink Floyd did. Carmen. He probably had one at some point.
Well, everyone except Carmen.
I don't know.
So did they actually put something together and it wasn't good and they didn't release it, or did they release something? Or
Tolkien put the kibosh on it.
Yeah, they tried to get rights and go down that path, but they never did. I mean, you've seen apparently somehow they let Leonard Nimoy write a song about hobbits. About Frodo Bilbo Baggins.
That song slaps. That's a good song.
It's what we need today. That's
right. You're hurting my soul.
Oh, man. All right, next one. All right, okay. What was Meriadoc Brandybuck? What was his original name in the first? I believe it was the first transcript that Tolkien submitted, or was available in notes. I don't know the exact one, but it was the very first wording. Okay, so this one's tough. I honestly wouldn't have known this one. I had to look this one up. Was it Merrimack? Was it Marmaduke? Was it Milo? Or was it Rorimac? What was Mary's original name? Was it Merrimack?
I don't know this. Let me think. Okay, give me the choices again.
Okay, Merrimack, Marmaduke, Rorimac, Milo, or Carmen?
One of these is going to be Carmen. I know it.
Was it?
I think that's the name of the new character in The Rings of Power, though.
Was it Milo?
Okay.
Milo, what's your guess?
The one that isn't M with an R.
Rorimac. You are both wrong.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was
Carmen. No.
Oh man, that's where he got his name from. It was Marmaduke, believe it or not.
Ah, okay.
Merrimack and Rorimac are progenitors, I think, or cousins, uncles, fathers, grandfathers.
Rorimac. Yeah, that gets he was like a grandfather. Okay,
Yeah, I think
not
so.
cool.
That sounds right.
Something like
And I
that.
think Mary Mac was 2. But Milo was a brandy buck somewhere down the line, like parallel to him in the family tree, or at least that was the nickname. But yeah, I thought it was funny. Milo, kind of like Sam. There's sort of
That's
simple
cool.
names that come along with that. And Marmaduke, a big giant
Love it.
dog. Who knew? Last one. So you guys are tied 2-2. Here we go. Who was first cast as Aragorn in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings? Who was the first person cast? Because it wasn't Viggo
I think I
Mortensen.
know this.
So was it Russell Crowe, Sean Bean, Stuart Townsend, Nicolas Cage, or Daniel Day-Lewis?
No Carmen?
Or Carmen. He would have made an awesome Lord. I mean, he could have played all the roles. So yeah.
I think I know this one.
Okay.
Do you know it, Michael?
Should I repeat it again?
Give me my names again.
Sure. Who was first cast as Aragorn in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and indeed did, I think, 3 days of filming before Jackson fired him and said he was too young, too weird. I can't remember the exact reasons, but there were he let him go and they had to go with another guy. Viggo Mortensen, obviously. Was it Russell Crowe, Sean Bean, Stuart Townsend, Daniel Day-Lewis, or Nicolas Cage?
I mean, if it's too weird, it's got to be Nicolas Cage. But I'm not going to guess Nicolas Cage. I'm pretty sure it wasn't him. I know that. Sean Bean wanted the part of Aragorn. I don't know if he actually played him for a few days before shifting, though. So I'll just go Sean Bean, and we'll see. What do you think, Dan?
I think it's Stuart Townsend.
Dan, unbelievable. Pulled it out at the end. Well done.
Nice
Good
job, Dan.
It was Stuart Townsend, who nobody actually really knows anymore. I don't even know what he's done since
Yeah.
being denied the Lord of the Rings position. But actually, the other 4, Sean Bean, yeah, I think he was angling for it. I think he might have tried out for the role, but didn't get it. But he was cast, obviously, as Boromir. Their first choice, I think, was Russell Crowe, who turned it down because he didn't think it was good enough. He didn't think it would make enough money. He didn't like the sharing of revenue. Oopsie. Daniel Day-Lewis was also there, but it wasn't up his alley. They also actually did slightly pursue Nicolas Cage, believe it or not, at one point. That would have been fun.
Yeah, that would have been
The bees.
That would have been.
Think about.
Yeah, that would. I mean, fun is one word for it, I guess. Like a trademark is fun.
They tried to get Sean Connery, didn't they, for Gandalf?
Gandalf. They did throw it out there. I think that was because the studio wanted it, not that Jackson wanted it, and he had to send it out to him. But
yeah, I remember reading something where Sean Connery read the script and he's like, "I can't figure out what's happening.
Yeah,
I don't know what is this like."
Yeah, I think that's in. There's a biography, or I think it's called The Filmmaker's Journey, Peter Jackson, Filmmaker's Journey, that was written after the Lord of the Rings movies were filmed, which goes into all the details about the process of making the films, which was pretty interesting. And he does talk about how Sean Connery denied them there at that point. But I think Connery retired soon after doing that too. He hasn't done anything. Did he?
Well, I have to say that the choice that they went with was excellent.
He's by far the best.
Ian McKellen was the rock star in that.
Yeah. That and Viggo Mortensen. I think the casting is spot on. All right, let's move on. Let's get into the meat of it. So, of the coming of the elves and the captivity of Melkor. First time we get to meet the elves. The first time we get to see a battle, essentially, between the more details of a battle between Morgoth, Melkor, and the Valar, a little bit. But Dan, we always like to start off if you have one.
Dan's big thought.
I mean, your one big thought isn't, I can't believe I won the trivia contest?
Well, that's the first big thought. The second big thought is just the fact that the elves name themselves the Quendi, I believe is what they say, because and the reason being that they find that they are the only ones they've encountered that speak with voices.
Mhm.
And so something I've been reading about with Tolkien for the last year, going through Lord of the Rings, is that he's all about languages, and it seems like he wrote the Lord of the Rings in part because he wanted to create a world where his languages could live. And I think it's interesting that the children of Illúvatar come and they have voices and they name themselves. And I think there's something very significant in that. And so I think there's something special about voices, language, naming, and then you also find them singing right away. They are born. They look up and see the stars, and it makes a very clear note that they are singing. So I thought that was kind of a interesting detail.
Nice.
I'd never thought about how I like how you tied that into Tolkien's desire to create a world for his languages, right? That his world was born out of the languages he'd already created, and so the languages birthed the elves. Right? It wasn't the other way around. He had this idea for elves that he needed to fill with languages. Like every single fantasy author that's come after him,
Yeah.
where they create the world and then they inhabit it and then they add the features around it. Whereas he had the features already created,
Mm-hmm.
and he just needed the right. Well, coming from his sub-creative mind, he had the right beings to inhabit the details he'd already created. It's probably a big reason why he does such a better job of world creation than any other fantasy author in the
Yeah, that's
history of
fascinating. I
mankind.
hadn't thought of that before. Is that is being tied into the order of his creation, where he creates his languages first.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
interesting.
Hmm.
There is so much tied in with words. I mean, the world is created through song, right? So we've read
Right,
about that.
right.
And then the elves, as Dan mentioned, are people of voices, and they sing. So, Dan, you touched on something that I didn't want to pass over, because from our previous episode we talked about how there was a moment where there was an accusation of the patriarchy, and so I wanted to go to this fantastic passage at the beginning of this chapter, near the beginning. First of all, because the passage has my boy Mandos, who's my favorite of the Valar, and he only talks like 8 times, so we gotta read it when he talks. So he says, "But at the bidding of Manwë, Mandos spoke." They're talking about the fate of the elves, what's to be done, whether the world should be relit with some new light, which is in darkness for the elves. And this is Mandos speaking. He says, "In this age, the children of Ilúvatar shall come indeed, but they come not yet. Moreover, it is doomed that the firstborn shall come into darkness and shall look first upon the stars. Great light shall be for their waning. To Varda ever shall they call it need." And then, immediately, Varda went forth from the council, and she looked out from the height of Taniquetil, and beheld the darkness of Middle Earth beneath the innumerable stars, faint and far. So there are already stars, but they're all faint and far. Then she began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar since their coming into Arda, and describes how she takes the silver dews of Telperion that she had gathered and makes the visible stars, or the prominent stars, for the elves. And so this is so from the patriarchy perspective, the greatest work ever done in Middle Earth is done by the female Valar, not
You mean the one
males.
that identifies as a female?
Right, she identifies as female, and she in fact is female, as it turns out.
Yes.
But it's interesting to me because the great crafter is Aule, right? But
Yeah.
she has, and Melkor, of course, creates in a way. He creates fortresses, and then he twists good things into evil things, a kind of dark creation. But she has the title of the worker of the greatest of all the works ever done in Arda, which is the creation of the stars.
Hmm.
So take that, patriarchy.
I think it's interesting too that it's sort of it's like Mandos's words almost calls her to create more light. Like she's
Yes.
like, there's not enough, and that she takes delight in that, and this is also where we get the innumerable names of all the stars here, which can be a little mind numbing at times. But it's great how her setting forth this star in the sky ties itself all the way down into when the light of the vial of Galadriel, right? When both Sam and
Exactly.
Frodo have it, and they use the words that that are awakened in them just because of what Varda had did, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 years before. We don't know exactly how long it is, but yeah, it's a great tie all the way back down into the very end of the Third Age.
Yep, exactly.
And,
So then most of the chapter is about describing how the elves were, in fact, in darkness, and that Morgoth knew, or Melkor, as he's still being called here, knew that they were there, and he sort of sowed seeds of fear so that they would respond badly when the Valar found them.
right.
And then the Valar that does find them is Orome, the huntsman, and so he meets them, he and his horse Nahar, and some of them are afraid, but most of them are won over, and some of them take a trip.
Some of them take a trip. They go down to the Bahamas. Yeah, well, and through all this, I think I'm trying to find the exact quote right here, but it's that it was the darkness was corrupted by Melkor, like he corrupts everything. And even though it's not like it's an interesting thing because you have the dark elves, right, or the gosh, I gotta look at. Okay, so Michael created this great document with pencil and paper,
Oh
which is
no!
foreign to me, but it kind of tries to figure out all the different names of the elves, from the Sindar to the Falmari to the Umanyar to the Avari to the Nandor to the Vanyar, right? All this together, how are they all spelled out? And I'll try and create a file so that you guys can download it and look at this as we're talking through it. But this whole separation of elves is incredibly hard to decipher just through this one chapter, I think. And maybe I'm jumping too far into this, and we need to talk a little bit more about Morgoth right now and what happens to him in Angband. But the separation of the elves, I think it's what the more Quendi are the dark elves, the ones that stay, right? Am I right in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all of the races that eventually stay. All the people. So
Right.
and this is what I didn't understand. You're absolutely right, Jonathan. That the names for the different groups, Tolkien just multiplies the names, and so I, for my own sake, had to sort of sketch it out at first. And so yeah, I made and hopefully our listeners will forgive and viewers will forgive my chicken scratches. But I did make a diagram because it was always interesting to me to try to separate them out in my head, and I failed miserably the first time I read Silmarillion.
Sure. Yeah.
And so yeah, there's a group. There are groups of them, and they're each given different names. I'm going to tie this back to what Dan said though at the beginning about voices and words, right? So it is interesting that every time a decision is made by the elves, a group of elves, they get a new name.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that decision is, whether the decision is we follow this leader, whether you're of the Vanyar, you're the followers of Ingwe and you're a particular race of elves, you have a name. You're the Vanyar. If you follow Finwë and you're a particular race of elves, the Deep Elves, you're Noldor. So
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. But then when you make the decision to stay in Middle Earth or never go with the Valar at all, don't start the journey, you get a different name. You're Avari. If you start the journey and then fall away during the journey, you're Umanyar. You get a different name. When you join the one elf who saw the light of the two trees and returned and then never went back, which is Elwë, who is then renamed Thingol. If you join him and never go to the land of the Valar, Aman, then you are Sindar. So they're always, whenever there's a decision made, there's a new name that goes with it. It's fascinating.
That's interesting. I didn't catch that. You're right. I'm just going through that. It's so much to take in. It's like looking at the stars that they list there. If they list all these here, you have a hard time. And there's similarity between the names too. That makes it even more difficult. So let's go through maybe some of these ones so that we can kind of recapture them. So there's the Quendi, which are the people of voices, like you mentioned, Dan, in your big thought, which Orome renames the people of the stars, the Eldar.
Mm.
So the Quendi and the Eldar are the same thing. And then you have the Noldor, who were the first, I think the first ones to cross. And if we look at Karen Wynn Fonstad's great atlas page that Michael Yusa have also brought up, the Great March of the Elves, the Vanyar and the Noldor, right? So they're the ones that come across the first first voyage.
Right, and the Vanyar are the smallest group and the most faithful to the Valar.
Right. And then the Noldor are Finwë, who will learn eventually that's where Feanor comes out of, and so does Galadriel. And some of those return to Middle Earth in battle and shame in a way. But then outside of that, you have those. So the Noldor, the Vanyar, they go in the first voyage to Aman, to Valinor.
Right.
The Teleri are those who tarried. Now, I think one thing, if you go further, the Teleri are also, as we get down further, the Teleri are also used for those that are essentially the Sea Elves, right? So here,
yeah, this particular point that you just brought up is the hardest one to decipher for me, and because he isn't really clear. There's all the other distinctions. If you dig in, you can actually get some clarity. This one, the way I drew it in the diagram that we may be able to bring up at some point here, but the way I drew it was that the Teleri referred to everyone else, and they were such a large group. They were a single group because Tolkien says they were so large they needed two leaders. So they have Olwe and Elwë as their leaders, not just one leader, like the Vanyar have one leader and the Noldor have one leader. So they have two leaders, and then one of those leaders will eventually, which is Elwë, will eventually become Thingol, and he'll establish a kingdom of elves that never cross the sea. And that are called the Sindar, and so the rest of them, the rest of the Teleri, in other words, they become the Sea Elves. They do cross, but they don't go into the heart of Valinor. They stay on the coasts because they have a great love of the sea, and so the word that he gives one time for that is the Falmari. And so that's the one I used.
really, just one time.
Well, it was one time.
I haven't come across. It's not
one
like
time in this chapter that I can remember. I didn't do a word search. Should probably do that.
The Falmari. I honestly didn't remember that they were called the Falmari until we reread this here, and you sent over your notes.
Right. So and then there's of course the group of elves like the Nandor, which they become. I think they're going to become the Sylvan. Basically, they're the elves that are closest to nature. And there's two groups of them. At first, they leave the main group of Teleri to stay in Middle Earth and become super close to nature. But then there's the second generation leader of them, whose name is Denethor. Hilariously, nothing like the Denethor that everyone's familiar with. But he leads a smaller group of those people, of those Nandor, away on the journey. I don't know if he reaches. I can't remember. I don't know if when it says so on the picture. I showed it as not the part of the Umanyar who never reach. So they might like the Sea Elves. Some of them might cross over, or they might end up staying in Beleriand and not crossing over. So this is all very confusing in one sense, but it is fascinating to me that Tolkien had so many subdivisions and felt the need to talk about them to this kind of extent. It's definitely a part of the structure of his story.
And remind me about Legolas is Sylvan, right? Or is he Sylvan?
He's Sylvan, and I believe that's going to become that's going to be
right.
From what's called in this chapter the Nondor.
Yeah, right. And so they're the people apart that never. No,
I mean, technically, also Umanyar, right? Because anyone that stays and never makes, anyone that starts the journey and never makes it is Umanyar.
Yeah. Well, so now that we've got all this worked out and it's totally clear in our heads.
So all the elves that we encounter in the Lord of the Rings are those or technically are they Umanyar because they never went to Valinor?
I know for sure Glorfindel and Galadriel are the two that
Yes.
would have seen the light of the two trees.
Now, Celeborn?
Celeborn, he's Noldor. Yeah,
Yeah, so he should be.
yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Wait, is he Noldor? Dang it!
Yeah, this is why we reread these books, because in even 5 passes, you're not going to remember everything.
Yeah, I can't remember if Celeborn is Noldor or not. For some reason, I think he's above. He's reaching above his station when he marries Galadriel. But maybe that's just because she's Galadriel.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
So, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just wondering
go ahead.
what do you think is behind? They make Tolkien makes a big deal of writing about these elves that set out for the journey, and then for one reason or another, they're too scared to keep going, or they're too distracted, or they're too like they're too attached to what they already know. It seems like there's something to that where he makes a big point about talking about the elves that just don't want to go all the way for some reason.
Yeah, it does. He does, and there's all groups of them, and yeah, we've talked about that a bit. So, is your question why?
Yeah, I'm just curious what is it about the trip that freaks so many of them out, I guess.
So it's a huge trip, right? And they're not going from point A to point B with lightning speed. It says
Right.
deliberately that Orome, who's leading them, has to let them stop and then go back to Valinor, then come back for them. And this journey takes many, many, many years, maybe centuries.
Hmm.
And so it's this is not, and each time the elves encounter something new, whether it's frightening or whether it is enticing, some of them stay and won't go further. And Middle Earth is a beautiful place. And so there's a lot of places that they stay, not because they're afraid, but because they grow to love the land and the beauty of the place that they're in.
Hmm.
And they don't know that there's greater beauty awaiting them, except for their 3 leaders who are like, no, it's a lot better over here. Just keep going. And funnily enough, one of those 3 leaders himself stays.
Hmm.
And we didn't even talk anything about the battle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, well, we don't even know, like, just how certain kinds of people are attracted to certain kinds of leaders, and they have certain kinds of dispositions. It would be impossible for us to know exactly what Tolkien thought about it, but it was enough to where it seemed important to him to create these separations that allowed him to create a story that was deep and complex, even among just the elves. But yeah, talking about the battle, maybe the place to start is when Orome finds them. The battle with Morgoth, with Melkor. Orome finds the elves, and I think Morgoth has already been. What's the right way of saying it? He has been. He was
Kidnapping.
aware of the awakening, and he sent. Here's the line. He sent shadows and evil spirits to spy upon them and waylay them. So it came to pass some years after the coming of Orome that if any of the elves strayed far abroad, alone or few together, they would often vanish and never return. And the Quendi said that the hunter had caught them and they were afraid. And so the hunter, which is Orome ultimately, but that's not obviously who it was. But Melkor had been scaring them already, and it seems to me that that's what prompted Orome to go back to the to the Valar and say, all right, we got to deal with this.
Yeah, and it specifically calls out that those that were captured, some of them became the first orcs. They were tortured and tormented and twisted into the first orcs.
Yeah.
So,
And interestingly enough, for me, I don't know, Dan, if you caught this here too. Unlike what we might see in the Two Towers or for the Fellowship of the Ring, but Fellowship of the Ring, yeah, where Tolkien wrote, "For the orcs had life and multiplied after the manner of the children of Illúvatar, and not had life of its own, nor the semblance of life could ever Melkor make since his rebellion in Ainulindale. Before the beginning, so wise, so say the wise." I didn't realize, and I know I'd caught this before, but I always forget that the orcs had life and multiplied after the manner of children of Illúvatar, because I think an argument often is that all the orcs are corrupted elves or men. But clearly not. That's not what Tolkien intended, because they multiplied after the manner of the children of Illúvatar. So does that mean that where there are female orcs that we're not seeing? kind of like the dwarves?
Yes, there has to be. That's the only thing that can mean.
You're right.
Yeah, their origin is the corruption and the twisting. It's not
Yeah.
it's not how they continue on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting this time around.
Yep. And to be fair,
do.
as we'll talk about later on in the book, there is some Tolkien's one of the biggest issues he had was with orcs throughout the creation of his world, and so there's other thoughts that come into his mind about them. But he very clearly, at least the work as laid out in the Silmarillion by Christopher Tolkien, he very clearly intends the origin of the orcs to be the corruption of some of the first elves.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a quote from Tolkien regarding a little bit about the orcs, where Tolkien was asked. I can't remember. This was May 1965. This is one of the quotes that was put out on Twitter a little bit ago. That I put out on Twitter is Tolkien wrote, "I don't feel obligated to make my story fit with formalized Christian theology. It's not anecdote." Though I actually intended it to be consonant with Christian thought and belief, which is asserted in Book 5, page 190, where Frodo asserts that the orcs are not evil in origin. So even Tolkien, like you said, he had trouble with the orcs because they were the personification of evil in a very real way to all the elves when they encountered them, but they were not evil in origin. And I think that was something he held on to when it came to that, and he had to make Frodo recognize that in Lord of the Rings too.
That's right, and it's clear from this passage. The orcs are not evil in origin because their origin is elves.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the battle.
Yeah,
it's how they come
classic Tolkien, right? There's all this run up, and then he just describes the battle in like a paragraph.
The most interesting part of this here that of the whole battle is that when Orme comes back and he tells them that essentially we need to do something about Melkor right now and the guarding of the Quendi, and Tolkien wrote, Manwë sat long and thought upon Taniquetil, or however you pronounce that, and he sought the counsel of Illúvatar, and coming down then to Valimar, he summoned the Valar to the Ring of Doom, and thither came even Olmo from the sea. Then Manwë said to the Valar, "This is the counsel of Illúvatar in my heart." That's interesting. That we should take up again the mastery of Ardo at whatsoever cost and deliver the Quendi from the shadow of Melkor. I thought it was interesting that he went to seek Illúvatar. That didn't really occur to me. It wasn't like a rah-rah, bang the drums, play the flutes and get the armies going. It was he went into thought in the way almost that like I would think that a prophet in the Bible does, right? He thinks like he takes his time and sees what is the heart of God to do. And
right, it's a kind of prayer. I mean, honestly, no matter what spiritual tradition you come from or none, it's in the manner of prayer where he's connecting with something higher than himself, and in this case, Illúvatar, and he's seeking the thought. And we were told in previous chapters that Manwë, the reason for his nobility, he's not greatest in power amongst the Valar, but he's greatest in nobility, and he's the closest to the mind of Illúvatar. And so he has a connection with Illúvatar that the others do not.
And I like that Tulkas was glad. That was the next phrase, right? It's like, all right.
Yes, you can see
let's
him.
Get this.
Yes,
we got him. But Aule was grieved, foreboding the hurts of the world that must come of that strife.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Melkor has spent all this time raising this massive fortress or series of fortresses and delving deep into the earth, and it's been countless years that he's been preparing for this battle, and then the Valar come over and just smash him.
Yeah.
And it's not like a push and pull. There doesn't seem to be a lot of tension in this one. It's just the power of the Valar just overwhelms Morgoth, and
it changes the entire shape of Middle Earth. Right?
Yep.
The great sea that sundered it from Aman grew wide and deep, and it broke in upon the coasts and made a deep gulf to the southward. Many lesser bays were made between the Great Gulf and Helcaraxa, far in the north, where Middle Earth and Aman. So there's like this is not few artillery shells flying. We're talking like massive nuclear explosions changing the entire face of
Correct.
that northern part of Middle Earth.
Yeah, the closest thing we can imagine would be nuclear power.
But even then,
unleashed.
it's not enough.
No,
Because it
nuclear
doesn't-
power doesn't actually destroy mountain
Yeah,
ranges
I mean,
and
perhaps-
make the sea come rushing into the land. This is a
Yeah.
power to crack
This is-
the earth, not
this is
not
like-
not just make holes in the earth.
It's like major shifting of the Earth's plates all of a sudden,
Right.
in order to change the face of the planet. Yeah,
I wonder who the hosts of the Valar, the first victory of the hosts of the West. Because I imagine, like, if it's the Valar coming, we're talking 14 people ish. So I think there's more than 14 in this host, and so you could say, well, it's the Maiar too, right? Okay,
Yeah.
great. I can't, I don't think it says, but I can't imagine. I think the you would have to think that no, that's it. That's all there is, right?
yeah. I mean, the Maiar. We don't know. We don't know how many there are really. Ultimately, do we? It's never mentioned that there are.
Yeah,
15
never
Maiar.
mentioned.
There could be thousands that we don't know about that tarry in
True.
Valinor.
So I've often wondered, like, who else is in
Yeah.
those? I guess it's just Valar and Maiar
Yeah.
in this case.
Yeah,
Now, in
I
the
mean,
in the next big war where this kind of thing happens, it's going to be different, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah, and I like that again. It's sort of we get to the chain and Gainor. I believe that's how it's pronounced. That Aule had wrought, and it just reminds me that Tolkien loves. You give meaning to objects. Like in the Lord of the Rings, there's Grond for just it's the battering ram to take down the doors of Gondor and Minas Tirith. And here it's like this chain is so important. We are giving it a proper name, and we're going to name it Angainor. Which honestly, I don't know what it means. Does he say right here what the meaning of Angainor is?
He does not, and I never looked it up. So that's a good trivia question. I don't know what
Big heavy chain.
Big heavy chain.
Probably knowing Tolkien, it probably just means something like never to be broken or something like that.
Yeah.
But I found it interesting what happens when Melkor is brought back to Valinor, bound hand and foot and blindfold, and he was brought to the Ring of Doom. So the Ring of Doom is actually in Valinor. It's a geographic feature.
It means iron. That's all it means. Apparently.
And Gainor means iron.
Yeah, it includes the word Enga, which means iron. So made of iron. Anyway, there you go. Sorry, go on.
There he, that's Melkor, lay upon his face before the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon, but his prayer was denied. And he was cast into the prison in the fastness of Mandos, whence none can escape, neither Vala, nor elf, nor mortal man. So, again, Mandos, the halls of Mandos are this place ruled by two Valar, Mandos himself, or darn it, forgot his original name already, just 2 chapters ago. Starts with an N though. So and his wife. And the power in these halls is so impenetrable that no one can escape, not even Valar. So it's fascinating. There's something else to this place.
Namo, I believe, was his name.
No, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did have to look that up. I don't remember all these names either.
All right. But it only says a name one. Like he calls him Mondos the rest of the book. So after his halls, just like Lorien is called Lorien after his forests in Valinor.
I think also looking at what happens after Melkor is chained, and then the Valar gathered in council where they were talking about what should be done with the Quendi, and the Valar summoned the Quendi to Valinor, there to be gathered at the knees of the powers in the light of the trees forever. And Mandos broke his silence, so it is doomed. From this summons came many woes that afterwards befell. And I think it was a couple episodes ago, we talked about how when the Valar go from guarding to commanding, that's when many woes afterwards befell them. Right? When problems happen. And so here they are summoning them. They're not saying, we're going to help you out there, we're going to guard you, we're going to help you, we're going to let you experience the creation that Illúvatar has created, and you are his firstborn that will enjoy it there, right? We're going to bring you here and just keep you safe, like little kids who we don't trust, right? Then it's like they never let them grow up, almost, or something along those lines. Where you look at Feanor down the road when we get there, right? His hot-headedness is like a child, and maybe that, is a little bit a part of it. That when they command them to do these things, there is no growth, there is no ability to go outside the bounds of the safe bounds of my crib, in a way. That's the second time that's occurred to me in the last couple of episodes.
It's really fascinating, Tolkien's ambivalence towards the rule of the Valar. I mean, here he's created a race of beings who are so high above the creatures, the rest of the creatures of the world, and they've been given this responsibility to guard the world and even to form it. But Tolkien has this distrust almost of even their ability to rightly rule. Like rulership seems like such a difficult thing in his mind, that even the Valar, even the good Valar, fail at it and make mistakes, and that cause great grief down the line. He seems very, very distrustful of the exercise of authority.
I don't know if that plays out, though.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I just see that.
I mean, when you look at the end of the Return of the King, right? It's the return of the king. It's the return of the authority.
I was thinking exactly that. And so there definitely is a rightful authority. And nobody says that, nobody would claim that Manwë isn't the rightful authority over the Valar and over the guardianship of Middle Earth. But he makes so many mistakes, and he's the closest to the mind of Illúvatar, and he makes so many mistakes in what he does and what he decides. It's fascinating.
Which we'll continue to see in the next couple of chapters when we deal with Morgoth a little bit more.
Yep. Well, we've gone a while.
Yeah, we have. Any other thoughts that we want to bring up? I thought it was interesting that the Misty Mountains, the Hithaglir, upon the borders of Eriador, were taller and more terrible in those days, and they were reared by Melkor to hinder the riding of Orome. So even the mountains that Gandalf and Frodo and Aragorn and Boromir had to pass over were the same mountains that Melkor reared in order to stop Orome from essentially getting to the Elves. That was an interesting.
That is really nice, interesting thought, because
and that the whole just so real fast, and to sort of with that point, the other point that was made about the Elves is that Tolkien wrote, "Never did Melkor forget that this war upon him was made for the sake of the Elves, and that they were the cause of his downfall." So his hatred of the Elves comes from the Valar wanting to protect them, ultimately.
Nice. Yeah. My thought was just about the Misty Mountains. Unlike in the movies, the spiritual force that the sort of the malice of the mountain that the Fellowship encounters as it's going over the Misty Mountains.
The pass of Caradhras.
Yeah, Caradhras. Yep. So the pass of Caradhras is a the mal. It wasn't Saruman chanting words that casting his weather control spell from afar that brings the mountain down on them or anything like that. There's actually a spirit of malice in the mountains that is opposing them. That's not Saruman.
That's a good point.
And Tolkien never elaborates more on that. But when we look at the origin of the mountains were raised by Morgoth. So how fitting is it that they end up being an enemy to the free peoples of the earth, awesome. Even unto the Third Age.
Right. And that would give a good reason to why there's the Watcher in the water, maybe, and we could go down the whole path of the Balrogs ended up being there because it's the mountains that Sauron reared, or that Morgoth reared.
Right. And only the dwarves are silly enough to think that they can make a profit off of this situation. Everyone else
they do for a time.
It was a good time. They made a good run of it. The ROI was pretty high before the Balrog came.
It was the worst of days. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I love that. Let's end on that because that ties together. I love tying together the very beginning of the Silmarillion all the way down to the very end of the Lord of the Rings that we can all identify with, because those of you who are listening, you've probably at least seen the movies, and so you get that. Awesome.
Exactly. And this is Tolkien, right? He writes in these emanating rings of history, where there's reflections, one age to another age to another age.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. That was great. I really liked this episode, like talking about all the different tie-ins together and trying to figure out all the elves, which really helped a lot just to talk about it and to think about it. So if you still don't get it, maybe listen one more time or take a look at the chart, the chicken scratch, as Michael says, that you put together in order to try and figure it all out.
Yeah, really that chart is super helpful.
Yeah. And so before we sign off, there's always, I like to do the
If you like Tolkien.
And one of the things that I got a long time ago, which is actually still in print, is this book called The Languages of Tolkien's Middle-earth. And it goes through all 14 languages. It talks about how to pronounce them. It has some vocabulary. It has, all the kirth and the runes and the letters and the things that are important to go through it. It's not that huge of a book, but it's 200 pages or so. Yeah. It's a great little reference. You can look up, specific... a lot of the proper names in here. There's a whole dictionary at the end. So if you're like, okay, who was Harion? Well, he was the third ruling steward of Gondor. Oh, all right, I got that. This came out, I think, in 1981 or 80. So it's been 74. It was first printed, but it's still in print. So clearly, it's worthwhile. So if you want something that's maybe a little addendum to the other side, you've got the visual and the Atlas of Middle-earth, and then here, if you really want to delve into the languages a little bit more, I think the Languages of Tolkien's Middle-earth by Ruth Noel is a great thing. Yeah, and there's Dan's got the Atlas of Middle-earth.
Yep, that's where our picture came from of the Journey of the Elves, what Dan was holding.
This is super cool.
I heartily recommend Noel's book that Jonathan was in. That was the first one. That was where I learned the languages. I was given it as a gift when I was in high school. And learned the Elvish script and Tengwar and all of that.
Wow! Wait! Hold on. Learned, like you actually sat down and like started like writing it and things like that?
Yeah.
Whoa! Yeah. That's awesome, man.
This is nerd
alert.
Nerd alert. This isn't Nerd 101 or Nerd 201. This is like Nerd 404.
Yeah, man. Hey, man, all I did was wait 225 hours for the Phantom Menace. So,
I just told my kids about Phantom Menace. They've never actually seen it.
Oh, yeah. Well, my kids were going to
watch. They've been spared.
Yeah, no, we watched.
I had mercy.
So another, if you like Tolkien, you probably also like Star Wars. And so back in like 10 years ago or so, or 8 years ago, somebody created the despecialized editions that you could download using torrents online for that. The only way to get the closest to the original versions of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Nice.
So watched that with my kids over the last 3 weeks. And the two girls in the middle, 7 and 9, they were they were astonished by Darth Vader and the whole thing because I'd kept that from them long enough. Anyway, so if you like Tolkien, look at the specialized editions of Star Wars. So, all right, guys, thanks for listening. This has gone a little bit longer. Maybe I'll cut out the whole half of the middle, and we'll see what we get of this. But yeah, next week we're going to go into Of Thingol and Melian. And remind me what the next chapter is of that.
Of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalier.
All right. So of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalier, I believe.
All right.
Pronounce that. Another one. So thanks for listening. Follow us on Twitter. Torc, Torc is the handle. You can find us on YouTube if you're not already watching there. You can give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to us. That's always appreciated. And subscribe because, we like to see people subscribe to us. In the future, we're going to have some comments from you guys. We're going to read some of those here on the podcast. We're not quite there yet. We've been pre-recording some of these episodes to give us a little bit of runway, but we'll be getting there eventually. So thanks for listening, and we see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Michael, Dan, and Jonathan want to thank you, the listener, for joining us. Visit us at theonering.com, your source for everything Tolkien, where you can comment on this episode and join the conversation. This is Austin Robertson, bidding you farewell. May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks.